Alright, what's going on, guys? It's time to cover another manga. This time, we're going to be doing the entire story for Full Metal Alchemist. Now, Full Metal Alchemist is a shonen manga that came out from 2001 to 2010. It's set in the 20th century in a fictional universe where alchemy is widely practiced. And the environment itself is very unique. It's got a steampunk vibe with European industrial society. And because of the popularity of the series itself, it spawned two anime adaptations. One that aired between 2003 to 2004 called Full Metal Alchemist, and the second one coming out between 2009 to 2010, titled Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. Now, the original series, as you can tell, came out in the very early stages of the manga, so there's quite a divergence between the story of the manga and the actual anime itself. A lot of the material sort of spins off into its own unique story, and to be honest with you guys, that was the first version of Full Metal Alchemist that I saw myself. So I kind of had a distorted perspective of Full Metal Alchemist before coming into the manga and Brotherhood. Now, of course, we'll talk about all of this by the end of the manga series, but for the purposes of this video, I want to go through roughly the first third of the actual manga itself. So that's right, I'll be splitting up this video into 3 parts, and then when we're done, I'll put it into one long video for you guys. So sit back, relax, and let's get ready for some Full Metal Alchemist. But before that, I got some fire anime merch that I want to show you guys, with a link in the description and a discount code to get you 10% off of your order. Alphonse! Damn it! How could this have happened? This shouldn't have happened! Damn it! I've lost it! Some years later, Edward and Alphonse, known as the Elric brothers, fix a small radio with alchemy. Edward, the older, smaller brother, is known as the Full Metal Alchemist. They find out about Cornello, the messenger of the sun god Leto. Turns out he has the ability to revive the dead. Edward meets with Rose, a believer in Cornello's powers. Edward states that there's been no successful human transmutation, and that alchemists don't believe in God. Yet, interestingly enough, they're probably the closest people to God. Cornello performs alchemy, but the Elric brothers point out that an equivalent exchange must be made, something Cornello did not do. Edward became a state alchemist at the age of 12, which means that he's a prodigy. The two are then accused of heresy, but proved to be quite formidable. Turns out that Alphonse's armor is actually empty. There's no human body inside. Edward confronts Cornello and discovers that he has a philosopher's stone. He reveals that he bamboozled the citizens, which upsets Rose. Despite her reservations, however, she chooses to believe that Cornello will resurrect her lover. Cornello then calls forth his chimera. The chimera bites Edward's arm, but he retaliates with a swift kick. The reason that the bite didn't hurt his arm is that his body has a piece of armor where his right arm should be. In a flashback, the Elric brothers perform a transmutation to bring back their mother. Unfortunately, it was a failure, costing Edward his left leg, and Alphonse his entire body. To save his younger brother, Edward gives up his right arm to put him in a suit of armor. In the now, Edward forms a barrier to block the priest's blast. The brothers grab Rose and make their escape. Cornello reveals his ruse to Edward, and as it turns out, Edward was transmitting the speech to all the citizens of the land. Edward then finds out that the Philosopher's Stone that Cornello had is, in fact, a fake. Edward then scares Cornello with the god statue. He then tells Rose to stand up and walk and move forward from her troubles. It turns out that lust and gluttony gave the magical stone to Cornello, as they reveal that it wasn't really a Philosopher's Stone. Lust then impales the priest with her sharp spike. Father is going to be mad. What should we do next? The Elric brothers arrive at the Yorswell coal mine. Edward shows off his skills to the townsfolk. After finding out he's an Elric brother, they kick him out of the restaurant. National alchemists visit the tavern and claim that the people aren't paying their taxes. Edward intervenes and reveals that he's a state alchemist. Yoki takes Edward to his mansion and attempts to bribe him to get in with the higher-ups. Yoki then orders his men to burn the Haulings Tavern due to their possible resistance. Ed then decides to transmute mining waste into gold. He then offers to buy the deed to the coal mines, to which Yoki agrees. But for legal purposes, they have to keep the deal under the table. Therefore, Yoki is just giving the coal mines to Edward. Edward then announces that he owns the coal mine, but he trades it to the townspeople for a night's stay and 2 meals. Yoki returns, wondering why the gold was transformed into rock, as he realizes that he was duped by Edward. The coal miners then vent their frustrations on Yoki and his men. General Halcrow prepares for his vacation with his family, but then the train is hijacked by the Blue Squad. It turns out that they want their imprisoned leader released from jail. The colonel then finds out that Edward is on the train. Edward then takes out one of the thugs that calls him a shrimp. Ed then climbs on top of the train. Bald receives word of what's happening as he shoots Halcrow in the air. Ed makes his way to the engine room, allowing for the engineers to take out the Blue Guard. Ed tells the Blue Guard to surrender the hostages, and after they refuse, he fills up the car with water. "Welcome," says Al. "Oh, another automail user?" The 2 brothers then take out Bald. Afterwards, the 2 meet up with the colonel. Bald attempts to attack once more, but the colonel snaps his fingers and incinerates the man. The colonel then reveals that his name is Roy Mustang, and he's the Flame Alchemist. Roy's glove is made of spark cloth, and he can adjust the oxygen around someone to cause a flame. After an inquiry, Ray shows Ed a file for an alchemist who can transmutate a talking chimera. However, it would only say one thing: "I want to die." Afterwards, they meet with the alchemist, Sho Tucker. Sho lost his wife 2 years ago as he shows Ed his file room. Al plays with Nina as Ed gets annoyed with the dog. Gene reminds Sho that evaluation day is coming soon. If Sho doesn't get a good evaluation, he'll have his license revoked. Days later, Al and Ed return to Sho's house to see his new creation. As the chimera says Edward, the Full Metal Alchemist begins to realize something. Where did Nina and Alexander go? Edward figures out that Sho transmutated his daughter with the dog, and did the same thing with his wife 2 years ago. Sho claims that they are the same, since they both played with human lives. Al apologizes to Nina as they take their leave. Ray then tells Ed that alchemists are all guilty at some level. "We're human beings, and we couldn't even save one girl." A mysterious man then approaches Sho. He places his hand on his head and destroys him on the spot. He kills the chimera and asks for God to watch over their pitiful souls. Ed then has a nightmare about not being able to save his mother. The brothers find out from Hawkeye that Sho and Nina died. At the scene of the crime, Major Armstrong determines that the cause of death fits with the description of someone that they are pursuing. In the town of Riol, Lust and Gluttony are met by a man who looks like Cornello. The 3 then enjoy the town tearing themselves apart. Cornello then transforms into Envy, the 3rd operative working under Father. Apparently, Edward is to be used as a human sacrifice for their scheme. To be an alchemist means to work within the laws. The world spins through the laws, and death is part of its currents. Nevertheless, Ed wants to go against the currents and restore their bodies. A military policeman finds the brothers as Scar lurks behind him. Scar destroys the officer as the brothers run away. Scar pursues them and cuts off their exit. With no other choice, the 2 decide to fight, but Scar is quite strong. The brothers withstand his attack, but Scar proceeds to destroy Ed's arm with his next attack. "Brother!" Scar agrees not to harm Alphonse as he reaches out for Edward. "That's as far as you go," says Ray. Scar believes that alchemists twist God's creation. He is a messenger of God who carries out God's judgment. Ray notes that Scar is only targeting alchemists with a national license. Ray prepares to engage Scar, but Hawkeye trips him so that Scar can't grab his head. Scar claims that he will eliminate National Alchemist. Armstrong, the strongest alchemist, then engages with Scar. He sends a spike towards Scar, but he dodges. "Destroy and create, for this is the law of the universe." The 3 parts of alchemy are knowledge, destruction, and recreation. Scar is only using the deconstruction aspect of alchemy. Armstrong then intentionally leaves an opening so that Hawkeye can shoot Scar. It is then revealed that Scar is an Ishvalan. Realizing that he's cornered, Scar destroys the ground to escape through the sewers. Alphonse then punches Ed for not running away like he told him so. Alphonse's right arm falls off as he reminds his brother that they are still alive. It turns out that the Ishvalans believe in one God. the god of creation, Ishvara. 13 years ago, there was a civil war that broke out between the people, so the military brass sent in national alchemists to annihilate the Ishvalans. Thus, this explains Scar's anger. But next time, the alchemist will take him out. With Edward's broken arm, he can't perform alchemy to fix Alphonse, so he'll have to go to a mechanic. Armstrong accompanies Ed on the train. Alphonse is packed up like luggage, since it's cheaper that way. Colonel Hughes sees Edward and Armstrong off. Lust is seen on the train reading a newspaper. Armstrong and Ed search for Dr. Marcoux, a former state alchemist who went AWOL after the war. The two approach the doctor as he says he doesn't want to go back. The doctor says he made a philosopher's stone, as he shows a vial with red liquid inside. It's an experimental creation that was used during the Civil War. Dr. Marcoux denies him access to the vials, and says it's better for him not to face hell. If you're talking about hell, I saw it a long time ago. The three prepare to depart, as Marcoux hands Ed a letter to the location of the research files. Marcoux then returns home. "It's been a while, Marcoux," says Lust. Marcoux ran away from the lab and took the files with him. Lust impales Marcoux. Marcoux then draws an alchemic structure with his blood and attacks Lust. Despite the deadly blow, Lust heals herself to Marco's horror. A girl named Kin walks in as Lust traps her with her fingers. Marco appears to reveal the location of Lust, as Ed finds out that they're heading to the National Central Library, First Branch. Lust allows Marco to live, as she plans on destroying the files. Ed arrives at Granny Panaco's house. Winry then gives Ed a rude welcome. It will now take 3 days to remake Ed's arm, and readjust his leg. Alphonse then urges Ed to visit their mother's grave. Granny Panaco remembers when Alphonse carried Ed to her house, and begged for her to save his life. In the now, she reveals that she was a drinking buddy with the boy's father. The father left them behind, and Winry's parents died during the war. The day that Ed earned his license, he burned down their house. Ed then has his new automail attached. Ed then shows Armstrong the seal that's binding Al's body to the armor. He then uses alchemy to fix up Ed. The three then engage in a little sparring. The next morning, the three get ready to depart. Winry, a little bit disappointed, then waves them goodbye. She then discovers a bolt that she forgot to attach to Ed's arm. Whoops-a-doodle! The three then arrive at Central. Maria Ross and Denny Broche take over security detail for Armstrong. Ed then discovers that the branch where Marco hid his books was burnt down. Halcrow then berates Roy for not capturing Scar. Roy makes his intentions known that he wants to become the president. Elsewhere, Lust admits to burning down the library as Gluttony catches the scent of an Ishvalan. Sometime later, in a sewer, Gluttony attacks Scar. The Elric brothers visit Seska, a woman who was employed by the branch library. Well, she used to be employed there until she got fired for reading too much. Turns out Seska has a photographic memory and can reproduce the text for the books that were burnt. After finishing it up, it turns out that they are culinary documents. Ed pays Seska for her hard work, which turns out to be an exorbitant amount. Ed explains that Marco's documents are coded, so that only an alchemist could understand them. As it turns out, Ed writes his alchemic notes on travel logs, and Roy writes his like they're dates for women. After some time, Ed can't break the code, as Seska receives a job in Hughes' office, since she memorized all the court-martial documents that were burnt in the fire. Ed eventually breaks the code, and finds out that the raw material needed for the Philosopher's Stone is living humans. Joy to suffering, victory to battle, life to the dead, for that is what is the blood-red stone grants. Men honor it with the name Philosopher's Stone. It'll take multiple sacrifices to produce just one stone. The state alchemist finds Scar's clothing, but no trace of the man himself. Roy wants Scar's corpse found. Elsewhere, Gluttony says he was unsuccessful in capturing Scar. Lust will head back to Central to inform Father. With the Philosopher's Stone out of their reach, Ed wonders if they'll live the rest of their lives with these artificial bodies. Ed then recalls Marco's words, "The truth behind the truth. I get it. There's something else." Ed then discovers the 5th Research Institute, which is situated next to a prison, meaning the inmates could have been used as raw materials. Brigadier General Grant is in charge of the research organization, but he was murdered by Scar just the other day. Armstrong forbids the brothers from sneaking in. However, the brothers head for the building in the dead of night. The two then hop over the brick wall. Two mysterious men, 48 and 66, decide to have some fun with the brothers. 66 lunges at Alphonse with a giant cleaver. Ed walks into a room with an alchemic circle used to transmutate the Philosopher's Stone. Ed then transmutes his arm into a blade and engages number 48. Ed kicks him, but the armor sounds hollow. Number 48 was formerly Slicer, a man who died 2 years ago. 48 then shows Ed his blood seal. Ross and Broche discover that the two brothers are missing. Number 48 draws Edward's blood. Number 48 then says that his companion is taking care of his friends, i.e. Alphonse. Ed claims that he never won a fight against Alphonse, meaning that Alphonse is more than capable of defending himself. Alphonse then knocks off number 48's helmet. It turns out that number 48 used to be Barry, a butcher who sliced up 23 people before getting hanged. Well, he didn't actually get hanged, because his body was bound to a suit of armor that Alphonse is staring at right now. Alphonse then reveals that he's also a soul bound to a suit of armor. Number 48 then attempts to confuse Alphonse by saying that his brother could have artificially created his memories and personality. 48 then slices off the head of the security guard. I kill, therefore I exist. Meanwhile, Edward tricks number 66 and knocks off his head. Ed asks about the Philosopher's Stone, but 66's body resumes the fight. Turns out that Slicer was a team of two brothers. Two brothers! Meaning there's a soul in the head and in the body. Ed then finds himself on the defensive. Ed doesn't have the time to transmutate, so instead, he takes a page out of Scar's playbook and uses the deconstruction alchemy on number 66. After losing the battle, 66 wants to be destroyed. He claims that it's not killing since he's no longer a human, but Edward refuses as it would acknowledge that his brother is not a human as well. Amused by Ed's generosity, 66 offers to tell him who made the stone. Unfortunately, Lust kills him before he can speak. Well then, what to do in a situation like this? Says Envy. The other brother begs for a new body as Envy destroys his seal. Envy commends Ed and threatens to kill him. Ed attempts to kick him, but he dodges. Ed attempts to transmutate his arm, but it fails as Envy knees him in the stomach. Lust and Envy decide to allow him to live, as they state that their project is in its final stages. Alphonse then wonders if his memories are real. The two go back and forth. Just then, Ross and Broche intervene with their guns. The building starts to vibrate as it comes crashing down. 66 makes his escape, as Envy is seen with Ed's body. Howdy y'all! I've come to drop off some baggage. At Central Prison, inmate Kimberly enjoys the sound of the explosives. We then see a transmutation circle on his hands. In the hospital, Ross slaps Edward for rushing off alone. Despite his age, Edward's status as a state alchemist gives him a high ranking, something Ross and Broche don't take lightly. Ed then calls Winry and tells her that he broke his arm, and she needs to come to Central so that she can fix it for him. Al then wants to ask Ed something, but he decides not to at the moment. He then goes into the bathroom and thinks about what Barry said, wondering if it's true that Edward fabricated his memories and he's not a real person. Upon exiting the train, Winry meets up with Armstrong. She finds out that Ed is in the hospital. Mustang talks to Hughes, telling him that he believes that Scar is dead. With the lack of personnel in Central at the moment, Mustang is slated to be assigned there. Hughes urges him to get at least one more person to support him. No way! Yells Winry. Winry worries that it's her fault, but Ed reassures her that it is not. Winry then gets angry that he didn't drink his milk, which Ed thoroughly loathes. Winry fixes the automail as Ed says that Al has been acting strange as of late. Winry finishes the repairs as Hughes enters the room. Hughes assumes that Ed is seducing Winry. The two escorts will be relieved of their duty. Hughes then offers to provide lodging for Winry. Winry then meets Hughes' family, and is charmed by Alicia, the daughter. A birthday party is held for Alicia as Winry fixes her new mouse toy. Winry then worries about the brothers as Hughes tells her that it's typical for guys to suffer alone. The next day, Alphonse tells Ed to drink his milk. Al, you're lucky since your body's huge. I didn't want to get this body, yells Al. Ed attempts to calm him down, but Alphonse is bubbling with rage. Al then accuses Edward of fabricating his memories. The two then walk off from each other. Winry then attacks Al with a wrench. Turns out that Ed thought that Al would blame him for being stuck inside that body. She then urges Al to chase down his brother. Al goes to the roof as Edward begins to spar with him. Ed uses a blanket to win the match, his first win over his younger brother. The two reconcile their differences as they agree to get stronger together. Ed tells Hughes and Armstrong about Envy and the mysterious tattoo of the Ouroboros. Surprisingly, President King Bradley then enters the room. Bradley asks Ed about how much he knows of the stone, but promptly claims he was kidding. As it turns out, all the people that worked on the Philosopher's Stone are currently missing. Bradley instructs him not to trust anyone in the military, and to wait for directives in the future. Ed and Al are now heading to Doubleth. Winry notes that they'll be passing Rush Valley, a famous town of automail technicians. The three then go onto the train and bid the others farewell. Hughes investigates the Ishvar Civil War as he is approached by Lust. Hughes gets badly injured, but Lust takes a dagger to the head. Outside the building, Hughes desperately attempts to call Mustang, but Ross approaches him with a gun. Hughes realizes it isn't Ross though, but when he attacks, the person transforms into his wife. Mustang answers the phone, but Hughes is already dead. Ed and Al want to see their sensei to get stronger, and to ask about human transmutation. Ed then eats some apple pie that was given to Winry from Mrs. Hughes. Elsewhere, a funeral is held for Hughes, as Alicia wonders why they're burying her papa. It turns out that Hughes was given a double promotion for dying in the line of duty. Mustang sheds some tears before returning to duty. Mustang then goes to the scene of the crime, and wonders what Hughes was going to tell him. As it turns out, Armstrong cannot talk about the suspects of the murder, and tells Mustang that the Elric brothers are after a legendary artifact. Mustang determines that Armstrong is being silenced by the military brass. Mustang thusly wants to become president and avenge Hughes. He asks Hawkeye if she will support him, which she unquestionably does. Dreaming, Scar meets with the alchemist who's in charge of destroying the region. He then comes to and finds himself engaged with Gluttony. He takes Gluttony's arm, but Lust ambushes him from behind a brick wall. Afterwards, Scar wakes up in a bed. It turns out that Scar is in a slum on the outskirts of the East City, and was saved by two young boys. Turns out the boys are Ishvalans. The boys then notice an interesting tattoo on Scar's right arm. It's something important I got from my family. At Rush Valley, people hold an arm wrestling match with their mechanical arms. Ed sits down at the table and wins in decisive fashion. Turns out that Ed used his alchemy to break the man's arm. After some people marvel at Ed's automail, he realizes that his state alchemist ID, i.e. the silver watch, is gone. Ed then tracks down the culprit to a pawn shop. Girl kicks a jar at Ed and runs off with the watch in hand. Ed and Al corner her, but she leaps over the wall. Ed gets attacked by a dog, but Al scares the bejesus out of it. "I'm gonna kill this bitch!" screams Ed. Not long after, Ed traps the girl by using alchemy on the roof. Nevertheless, the girl's acrobatics prove to be too much for Ed. He then attempts to trap her in a cage, but she proves to be too elusive. The girl then walks into Al's alchemic circle, as he traps her inside of a cage. However, with her automail legs, she manages to escape. Winry then captures the girl and asks to take a closer look at her automail. Afterwards, the four head to a mountainous region to meet up with the girl's mechanic. Bunny, the girl, meets up with Tommy. Winry marvels at Tommy's design, calling it a work of art. The trio then meet up with Tommy's son and pregnant wife. Tommy inspects Ed's arm as Winry requests to be an apprentice, but he declines. As it turns out, Bunny lost her legs during an accident and was found by Tommy. Tommy gave her mechanical legs and improved her outlook on life. Winry tells Bunny to stop being a thief and to live life to its fullest. Winry then opens Edward's watch and finds an inscription inside. "Don't forget October 3rd of 11. Just then, Lear's wife goes into labor. Unfortunately, lightning takes out the bridge. Ed then uses alchemy to build another bridge, but it gets too heavy and collapses from the stress. Tommy then decides to take the long way to town. Just then, Sedilla's water breaks, so Winry has no other choice but to deliver the baby herself. Ed and Al wish her good luck as she prepares for the ordeal. After some time, Ed and Al go inside the room to meet the newly born baby. Bunny is in a bit of shock from the sight of blood, however. Ed carries the exhausted Winry as she mentions that she saw what was written inside Ed's silver watch. Turns out that Al has never seen what was inside. It turns out that the date coincides with the day that they burnt down their house. Tommy returns with the doctor, as he is overjoyed to meet his new grandson. Ed attempts to convince Tommy to accept Winry as an apprentice, given the fact that she helped out with the labor. But Tommy still declines. Tommy then finds out that Granny Panaco is Winry's grandmother. Thus, in a roundabout way, Tommy permits Winry to come and learn from him. Ed and Al then board a train for Doubleth, as they bid Winry and Bunny farewell. The two brothers then arrive in Doubleth as they go to a meat shop. Mason says hello and offers to get Mr. Izumi for them. The boss, Sig Curtis, then emerges with a butcher's knife in his hand. Ed then recalls how his father always buried his head in alchemic books and barely spoke to him. Every time that their father would go away without explaining why, their mother would cry. Sig then welcomes the two brothers. He then takes them to Izumi, their master, who's currently sick. She kicks Ed and says, "You actually became a dog of the military!" Izumi shakes Al's hand and puts him on the ground. Izumi then coughs up blood as Sig instructs her not to speak. Izumi then states that they met a man named Hohenheim, who is very interested in stones. "He's our father," replies Al. "I will never ask that bastard for help," says Edward with vitriol. It turns out that when Izumi saw Hohenheim, he was very close to achieving his dream. While eating, Ed remarks that Izumi hasn't had any kids yet. which pisses her off. Ed and Al then display their improved alchemic skills to Izumi. Izumi determines that Ed can use alchemy without circles, because he saw that quote-unquote thing. A small girl then brings her cat to Izumi, but the creature is already dead. Though she can fix many things, Izumi cannot restore life through alchemy. Ed then wonders if they can revive a dead person, and Izumi says yes. Izumi then determines that Al's armor is empty, and Ed has prosthetics. Don't take me for a fool. What happened? Speak up! Izumi demands to know what happened. Ed has flashes of memory of his mother and becoming a state alchemist. Where should I start? In the past, Ed and Al's mother finds them in their father's study. Turns out that they're self-taught alchemists, as they display their abilities. Unfortunately, not long after that, the mother died from the plague. At the grave, the boys speak of human transmutation and bringing back their mother. Al wonders if their dad could help, but Ed wants nothing to do with him. During a massive rainstorm, Izumi creates a wall to prevent some flooding. She coughs up blood and ends up in the hospital. Granny, please accept us as your disciples. She henceforth gives them 1 month to prove themselves. The four go to Douglas landmark, Lake Koroi. She drops them off on Jack's Island and instructs them to stay alive for 1 month. And she gives them a piece of advice as well. One is all is one. On their first night, they're attacked by a gruesome monster. Sig worries about the boys, but Izumi seems unconcerned, saying there's no monsters that can kill them. Meanwhile, the monster leaps up to attack the boys. Ed kicks the monster in the face, but it looks like a person wearing a mask. The two eventually find a hiding spot and keep quiet. The next day, they catch a rabbit for food. They hesitate and have it stolen by a fox. They then catch a nice fish and start a fire, but the monster attacks them once more. The monster catches Ed and says, "It's my island, get out!" Despite the beating, the two brothers refuse to leave. The struggles continue with the mysterious man. The two begin to lose their resolve, as the cryptic warrior returns once more. Sometime later, the boys are on the verge of death, but they don't want to die. The warrior then makes the two fish to eat. Ed contemplates the circle of life and how they fit into that. We are all living according to countless rules. Destroying and rebuilding objects according to those rules is what we call alchemy. Izumi then returns. Tell me, what does one is all and all is one mean? All is the world and one is me. She accepts this answer as they prepare to leave. Just then, the mysterious warrior hops onto the boat and reveals he's Mason. After about half a year, the boys return to Granny and Winry. Winry asks them about their training as the boys freak out. The boys then fix a barn for one of the villagers with alchemy. We then see the boys training with Izumi as she reads alchemic principles to them. She discourages the two from reviving a human. The boys then wonder how she's able to perform alchemy without a circle, but she says it requires a true knowledge. The two then collect materials required for making a human. They drop in their own blood as the process begins. Unfortunately, Al's arm and Ed's legs detach from their bodies. Al disappears as Ed finds himself in a white expanse next to a tablet with the Sephirotic Tree of Life engraved upon it. He then meets a being whom refers to himself as the universe, God, true knowledge, all or one. And I'm you. Welcome, ignorant fool. I'll show you true knowledge, says God. What the hell is this? Yells Ed. Ed sees a figure resembling his mom, but she disappears. An incredible amount of information was crammed into Ed's head. This is true knowledge. Ed wants to see more, but God won't show him any more for the passage fee he paid. Passage fee? That's correct. Equivalent trade, no? Ed wakes up with his leg missing. He then sees a monstrosity within the alchemic circle. Ed begs for his little brother back, as he offers up part of his own body to save him. That fool, he's back for more? Roy visits Risenball to recruit the Elric brothers, but he's shocked that they're so young. He then walks into their house and finds an alchemic circle with blood inside. Mustang goes to the Rockbell family to find the two brothers. Angered, Mustang demands to know what happened in their home. Unfortunately, Ed can't muster an answer. Mustang believes that the boys are qualified to be state alchemists. Granny Pinnacle buried the inhuman creature that the boys attempted to resurrect. Winry begs Hawkeye not to take the brothers away from her. It turns out that Hawkeye doesn't like the military either, but needs to stay in it to protect someone special to her. Mustang finishes his speech to the boys as he awaits a response. Ed decides to have automail limbs transplanted onto his body, as he promises to return Al to his old body. The brothers then spar as Winry scolds them. Ed then performs alchemy without drawing a circle. Afterwards, Ed meets up with Mustang in East City, where he makes his intentions known about wanting to be a dog for the military. During his alchemic exam, Ed transmutates a lance out of the ground without a circle. He then lunges towards President King Bradley. Ed seems to have caught him off guard, but Bradley sliced his lance without him even noticing. Later on, Mustang hints at the idea that it would have been advantageous if Bradley died, since he would have been promoted. Mustang reminds Ed not to mention his true past, otherwise him and his brother would be experimented on. Ed then receives his contract and is given the name Full Metal. Later on, Ed burns down their parents' house and says there's no turning back now. Izumi is pissed off at the boys for attempting to resurrect a human, but as it turns out, she tried the same thing. She then embraces the boys as they apologize. She then says that they're out, since she didn't train them to turn their bodies into that. Ed then thanks her for everything. Sig then reveals that Izumi got sick carrying their first child, and henceforth became infertile. Even though the brothers aren't apprentices, they could still talk to Izumi as normal people. They return to her and beg for her to teach them how to return their bodies to normal. Izumi reluctantly accepts. Since Al lost his body, he must have been the closest to true knowledge. For this, however, they need a method to return Al's memory. In East City, Mustang plays chess against General Grumman. Mustang then gathers his crew and says they'll be accompanying him to Central. Elsewhere, a beggar asks Ed for some money, but the boy refuses. The beggar persists on and kicks Al's head off of his body. Ed attempts to trap the man, but he climbs up with ease. "I'm amazing too," says the man. A mysterious man with an Ouroboros tattoo on his head then demands his men to capture Ed and Al. Al then says he needs to take his annual assessment. He needs to do this in person and will have to leave for about 2 to 3 days. Elsewhere, Scar is seen training. He's then told that vengeance only breeds more vengeance, and he must break the cycle. Two thugs then look to collect his bounty. They thusly attack him, but Scar takes them out with ease. "Your brother would be sad. I can no longer turn back," says Scar. Al then receives instructions to an abandoned factory, which he decides to go to. The men surround him and offer to reveal critical information to him. Al kicks one of the men and runs off. Because Al doesn't experience physical exhaustion, he can simply outrun his captors. Dorchette eventually catches up and knocks Al's head off. Martel then jumps into Al's armor. She uses this chance to control Al's body from the inside. Roa then takes Al down with an armbar. "You're called Alphonse Elric, right? Come with us to our master." Al tells Martel not to touch his blood symbol, otherwise he'll die. Martel is a chimera that has merged with a snake. There were many failures, but they were part of the successful ones. Dorchette merged with a dog as the leader walks in. "I'm called Greed. Let's be friends." Greed knows about Al from the rumors of the battle with him and Scar in East City. As it turns out, Greed wants to be immortal, but Al uses alchemy to punch him in the gut. Roa then destroys Greed's head, but he proves to be quite indestructible. He reveals that he's a homunculus, and he's been living for over 200 years. Greed wants to know how Al's body was alchemized, but Al says his brother was the one responsible. Meanwhile, at South HQ, Ed runs into Armstrong. President Bradley then approves Ed's paperwork without him performing the testing. Bradley then considers recruiting Izumi, but Ed warns him against that. Izumi then goes to Devil's Nest Bar to find Al. After she and Sig take out the men, they ask for Al's location. After failing to uncover Al's secrets, Izumi barges in with extreme fury. She scolds Al as the guards wonder who she is. "I'm a housewife!" Izumi aims to take Al back, as she punches Greed in the face. "Your fingers must be hurting a lot, huh?" says Greed. Al tells Izumi that Greed is a homunculus. Greed offers a trade. He'll teach them how to make a homunculus if they teach him how to transmutate a soul. Izumi then gives them a warning as she departs. Ed returns to Doubleth as he finds out that Bradley and Armstrong followed him here. This is known as the Armstrong family's famous stalking technique. The three head to the meat shop as Armstrong and Sig start posing in front of each other. A friendship is then born from muscles. Izumi tells Ed about Greed and how he's a homunculus. Ed then makes his way to the Devil's Nest with intense rage. He meets with Greed and angrily proclaims that they are the villains and he'll force the secrets out of them. Ed takes down Dorchette as Roa grabs Al's body. Ed looks to save Al, but Greed intervenes. Ed cracks Greed's skull open, but it's to no avail. Greed's regeneration rate is accelerated, and he possesses a protective shield. Greed then transforms his body, looking to go all out. Outside the Devil's Nest, President Bradley and his men look to infiltrate to save Al and Ed. Roa and Dorchette are forced to the lower levels as they put up their last stand. Meanwhile, Ed struggles with Greed's ultimate shield. Armstrong then engages Roa. Roa then unleashes his chimera abilities. The two trade blows, foes, as they appear to be evenly matched. Soldiers remind Armstrong that Bradley is here too. Just then, Bradley kills Dorchette with his sword. He then finishes off Roa and scolds Armstrong for not finishing them off. Do not feel sympathetic for your enemies. This is why you haven't been able to be promoted. Ed seems to have found a weakness in Greed. Ed injures Greed and states that the hard substance on his body is made of carbon. He also figured out that hardening and regeneration cannot occur at the same time. The military intervenes as Greed makes his escape. In the sewers, President Bradley states he won't allow Greed to escape. Bradley slices off Greed's arm. Bradley's attacks are so fast that Greed can't even regenerate or harden his body. How can a person like me survive battlefields full of flying bullets and shells and be able to rise in rank? Do you understand? Just as you have the ultimate shield, I have the ultimate eye. Roa and Dorchette rise from the dead to make their escape. Greed approaches Al, but is impaled by Bradley's sword. Bradley has killed Greed 15 times, and wonders how many more times before he's finished off. Dorchette releases Al and asks for him to help Martel to escape. Martel begs to get out as Bradley cuts down Dorchette and Roa once more. Bradley then pins down Greed with his swords. Stay down for now. Miss Martel uses Al's body to choke King Bradley. He kills her with his swords as blood sprays onto Al's blood seal. This causes his memories to flood back as he remembers his encounter with the truth. Ed then finds Al as the younger brother cries about not being able to save Martel. Bradley wonders if the brothers made a deal with Greed, and if so, they'll be executed. Bradley then asks about the brothers' armor, but eventually takes his leave. Al then tells Ed about his regained memories, but didn't learn anything new about human transmutation. Ed then wonders why Bradley involved himself in the attack on Greed. Elsewhere, Barry the Chopper attacks Hawkeye in an alley, but she shoots him. She mentions that Alphonse is like him. She then calls Mustang to report that she caught Barry. Hawkeye brings Barry to Mustang. After some questioning, the armored man proves to be Barry, a man who should have been executed long ago. Barry says incomplete Philosopher's Stones were being made in the 5th Institute using living humans. Barry was forcefully torn from his body and put in this armor. And as it turns out, the researchers that worked on the stone were also used as ingredients for the stones. Mustang and Hawkeye leave as Vada watches over Barry. Deep below the presidential home, Bradley presents Greed to lust, envy, and gluttony. Greed is the ultimate shield, and lust is the ultimate lance. As it turns out, Greed left him over a century ago. Sloth is off working somewhere to prevent him from being lazy. And as it turns out, President Bradley is Wrath. The group bickers some more as they get interrupted by Father. Father shares a soul with the homunculi, and because Greed won't work for him, he'll have to liquefy him. Father then grabs the liquid. For the days to come, to your resolve, loyalty, and respect. Bradley then meets up with his wife and son. And as it turns out, his son loves hearing about the Full Metal Alchemist. Kyle then meets up with Mei Chen from Shin. She has traveled a far distance to find a way of becoming immortal. Mine 8 then collapses, the very mine Kyle's dad is working in. Mei performs an alchemic sequence to restore the mine. The saved miners then celebrate and tell Mei all about Edward Elric, another alchemist. She then boards a train to meet with Edward, thinking he's some tall, hunking man. The Elric brothers return to Winry so that she can fix Ed's arm again. Al then catches up with Bunny as Winry fixes Ed's arm. As it turns out, the three want to go to Central together. Afterwards, the brothers find a man on the streets and end up feeding him. Turns out he's from Shin and barely survived due to the hellish desert. He refers to alchemy as Rentanjutsu, and it was used for medical purposes in his country. Turns out that alchemy became very militarily focused ever since Bradley took over. The man reveals that his name is Rin, and he's looking for the Philosopher's Stone. I want it really bad. Do you know about it? Ling then threatens them with his trained assassins. Turns out he wants to gain immortality. The two assassins prove to be tricky with their acrobatics, but the brothers remain confident. Ed engages one in battle, narrowly avoiding his arm getting broken. The assassin then aims for Ed's eyes. Meanwhile, Al meets up with Bunny. The assassin charges them as Ed seizes the advantage in his battle. Ed then destroys the assassin's mask as she throws a kunai into his mechanical arm. She throws a bomb as Bunny uses the cannon in her leg to fire at the other assassin. Al then uses alchemy without a circle to catch the assassin. The woman assassin grabs Ed's detached arm, as Full Metal captures her with a rope. Turns out that Ed cut off his own mechanical arm to lure her into his trap. Ling appears and tells Ed to become his subordinate so he can take over a nation. When the townsfolk come over, Ling and the other assassins flee. Ed then laments the fact that Al can now perform alchemy without a circle. Ling will henceforth follow the brothers to learn more about the Philosopher's Stone. The brothers then meet up with Ling again. Winry sees Ed's broken arm and is none too pleased. Ed wants his arm fixed so he can go back to Central, and as it turns out, Ling wants to follow them there. Scar makes his way to Central as well, as he tells Yoki that he has cast away his real name. Ed remakes Lanfei's mask. Ed, Al, Winry, and Ling all board onto a train to go to Central. They then find out that Ling is only 15 years old, just like Ed. However, he's much taller. Lanfan and Fu are riding on top of the train. Havoc then checks in on Fallman and Barry. Elsewhere, Mustang is sleeping in the document storage room. Mustang leaves as Sheska tells Captain Fokker that the colonel was looking at a list of executed prisoners at Central Prison. He also looked at documents regarding the 5th Research Institute and the case with Hughes. Sheska suspects that someone in the military may have been involved in killing Hughes. It is then revealed that Envy was impersonating Fokker. Armstrong meets up with Mustang in the bathroom. They comment that Ed will be 16 soon, and henceforth will be sent to the battlefields. Armstrong then recalls his own time on the battlefield. Though Armstrong doesn't want to defy the military, he wants to use his strength to protect the weak. Armstrong tells Mustang that he did not inform the brothers about Hughes' death. Envy then tells us that Mustang is attempting to find out more about Hughes' death. Suddenly, Envy gets an idea on how to handle Mustang's constant poking around. Ross is then declared a prime suspect in the murder of Hughes. Elsewhere, Havoc meets up with his date. Lust, the date, wants to hear more interesting stories from Havoc. Ed's group then arrives in Central. Ling is then taken away for being an illegal immigrant.
Not to be racist or anything, but Asian people.
Ed's group then meets up with Mustang and Hawkeye. Ed wants to learn more about homunculi and visit Hughes. He's not here, says Mustang. Mustang claims that Hughes went back to the countryside with his family. Mustang then finds out that Ross was connected with Hughes' murder. Elsewhere, Ross is questioned by Armstrong about the missing bullets in her gun. Broche confirms Ross's story, but he's not allowed into the building. And because of this, it seems as though Ross is being set up to take the fall for the murder. Elsewhere, Al brings Ed a newspaper that says that Ross is convicted as the murderer of Hughes. Barry then breaks into the jail where Ross is being held. He then decides to help out Ling as he grabs a sword. Hello, honey. Finally found you.
Hey, honey bunnies.
He gives her a choice to die by the military's hand or to escape with him. With no other choice, she reluctantly decides to escape. Mustang decides to go out for a little bit as Ed and Al run into Barry's group. Barry tells Ross to escape as Ed and Al are confused by the circumstances. In a dark alley, Mustang confronts Ross. He then snaps his fingers, causing a massive explosion. Ed heads towards the explosion and finds Mustang in a dead body with a bracelet on it that says Maria Ross. What the hell is going on? Winry finally sees the newspaper as Mustang punches Ed. The military collects the body, but can't tell who it is because of how badly it's burnt. Armstrong then apologizes to the brothers for hiding Hughes' death. Because Armstrong has become emotional from the death, Mustang suggests that he take a vacation. Ling then makes some smoke signals outside of Barry's safe house, allowing Lanfan and Fu to find him. Winry then visits Alicia and Mrs. Hughes. Mrs. Hughes then tells Ed and Al that Winry is at her house. The brothers arrive at the house and tell Mrs. Hughes and Winry that Mr. Hughes helped them research the Philosopher's Stone, and most likely because of this, got killed. Though she misses her husband, she wants the boys to continue researching the stone. That way, his death won't be in vain. The three leave as Mrs. Hughes begins to sob. Ed checks in on Winry as she reveals that she baked an apple pie. She wanted Mr. Hughes to try the pie as she begins to cry. Elsewhere, Lust, Envy, and Gluttony talk about their plans with Mustang coming to fruition. But now, with Barry on the loose, Lust decides to send Barry's old body to go after him. Ling asks Barry about immortality. At Central, Mustang is on the line with an apparent girlfriend. I'm considering finishing my latest obsession. How about you join me? Says Mustang. Winry tells the brothers that she worries about them. She wants them to get their bodies back, but she doesn't want them to go on a dangerous journey. Armstrong then comes comes in and punches Ed.
And a thief.
He says his armor is broken and they need to heal him in Resin Bowl. Ling then confronts Al and Winry and says that the two brothers are interesting. It turns out that Mustang's conversations turn out to be covert operations. Barry the Chopper then attacks Barry the Chopper. A masked assassin bursts in and starts repelling Barry's body. Turns out that the masked man is Havoc. Barry's original body takes the upper hand. The body emits a powerful odor as Hawkeye shoots the original Barry in the hand. The armored Barry then determines that the original one came back to get its soul back. Armored Barry then gets excited at the notion of chopping up his own body. Hawkeye is then approached by Gluttony, so she shoots him in the head. However, Gluttony merely smiles back at her. Lanfan approaches Envy on the rooftop as Mustang worries about Hawkeye's safety. Ling and Alphonse decide it's time to go. Lust tells Father that things with Barry will resolve themselves, as body and soul attract one another. Envy has already died 3 times. She conceals herself and attacks, but Lanfan sees through this ruse. Gluttony looks to eat Hawkeye, but Hawkeye's dog comes in to provide a distraction. Hawkeye is then tossed a gun as she shoots Gluttony. The homunculi looks unharmed, so Mustang blasts him with his fire alchemy. Envy turns into a dog and looks to retreat, but Lanfan throws a kunai knife into his eye. Envy writhes in pain as Ling notices that his body composition is unusual. Gluttony attacks as Ling and Lanfan realize that he's immortal. Mustang looks to chase the target as Al decides to join him. Al then tells Mustang about the homunculi. Though Mustang is reluctant to believe him, the evidence suggests that they are battling homunculi. They chase the target to the Central Alchemical Laboratory number 3. Barry enters in haphazardly as Mustang uses his opportunity to chase after him and instructs everyone to evacuate. They lose the two and decide to split up into pairs. Mustang and Havoc run into Lust, with Havoc realizing that this is the girl he's been dating. Lust regrets not killing Hughes as Mustang shoots her in the leg. She gets shot in the chest as Havoc realizes that she's a homunculus. "Can you see it? It's the Philosopher's Stone," says Lust. "Humans that are created with this stone as their nucleus? That's us." Despite being called a freak, Lust claims that homunculi have the same appearance as humans. They also possess 5 senses, emotions, and affection. We are humans. Mustang determines that something confidential is kept in this room. Lust proceeds to slice Mustang's gun in half. Mustang puts on his glove, but Lust slashes a water pipe that douses him in water, rendering his alchemy ineffective. She attacks them as they run for cover. Mustang says that things are in their favor, since a lot of water means that there's a lot of hydrogen. As Mustang increases the hydrogen gas in the room, Havoc tosses a lighter, eliciting a massive explosion. They investigate the room and determine that Lust had burnt up. They look for the corpse, but Havoc is then impaled by the homunculus's ability. "Havoc!" She states he'll die as Mustang fires a gun at her. "It's no use. There's still a long way before I die," says Lust. "There is a way to save him. Right here," replies Mustang. He rips out the Philosopher's Stone and intends to use it to treat Havoc. "Isn't it rude for you to stick a hand in between a lady's breast, Colonel Mustang?" says Lust as she pierces the colonel. Bradley decides he wants to enter the facility and help out Mustang. "Didn't I tell you? The Philosopher's Stone is the nucleus. Our existence is closer to the truth than you humans are. Let's put it this way. We homunculi are a newly evolved form of mankind." Lust wanted to use Mustang for human sacrifice, but as it stands, he knows too much. Mustang screams for Havoc as Lust decides it's time to take care of the other intruders. Elsewhere, Barry has killed his older self. Because a different soul was put into Barry's body, there was a rejection. Al then worries about his own soul rejecting. Envy and Lanfan continue fighting, while Ling slices Gluttony in half. "Hey, won't you please surrender already?" says Ling. Envy and Gluttony look to attack, but are interrupted by Pride. Pride then implores them to retreat as they comply. Lust then approaches Barry, Al, and Hawkeye. Barry intends to chop Lust to pieces. Lust laments that Al is here, and that 2 candidates for human sacrifice will be lost in the same day. Barry lunges at Lust, but she easily takes off his head. Hawkeye pieces together the clues and realizes that Mustang must already be dead. "You bitch!" screams Hawkeye. After firing several rounds at Lust, the homunculi remains unharmed. "Foolish and weak. Surely humans are sad creatures." Al intervenes and summons a lance from the ground, much like his brother. "I see you open the gate." She destroys the lance and pierces his body multiple times. Al remains steadfast in protecting Hawkeye. "Well said, Alphonse Elric," says a voice. Al then summons a protective barrier to protect Hawkeye and himself from the oncoming blast. Mustang uses surprise attack to put Lust on her knees. He then reveals that he burnt his own wounds to stop the bleeding. That is what you said. There is still a long way before I die. I will continuously kill you until you do die. Enraged, Lust aims to pierce the Colonel's skull, but she comes up short. You win, says Lust. I can't wait. The day your eyes will be filled with torment. Lust's body, along with the Philosopher's Stone, begins to disintegrate into dust. Mustang collapses as we see Bradley behind the corner. Bradley puts his sword away as he walks off. The old Barry then scratches off the blood rune on the armor, killing both body and soul simultaneously. Al then returns to a worried Winry.
I got nightmares in my head, I